Okay, well, wonderful. Thank you so much. We're all here, and Carrie is here online. Thank you, Carrie, for being here. So I think I shared a little bit about what we're going to do today. So I think we'll start with introductions, and feel free to share a little bit about how you come today to this. We'll get into give people opportunity to share what they, in the discussion, how you, the landscape of special education and how it's related to opioid use disorder and gaps. We'll get into that, but I welcome you to share about yourself and how you've come to this work today. So I can start. So I'm Liz Blackwell-Moore. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the director of public health for Cumberland County government. And I have been in the field of public health and intersection of public health and behavioral health for the past 25 years. I started my career in harm reduction, and then after getting a master's in public health, did like substance use prevention and behavioral health promotion work for about 10 years at Opportunity Alliance. Then I was a consultant on public health and did a lot of work around supporting municipalities and other entities to figure out what is their role in addressing addiction. And then I was hired to start a public health department at Cumberland County. So I've been doing that for the last 4 years. And we have funds to do tobacco and substance use prevention, but then we also have funding and do a lot of work around work in the criminal legal system to make the criminal legal system make improvements for folks who have a substance use disorder. So we have a couple staff who do that work. And I've been on the Maine Recovery Council now. This is my third, I've been on it 3 years. And I led like a prevention work group where we were looking specifically, bringing a group of people like this together of experts across the state in prevention to figure out, what is the prevention work that needs to be funded by the Maine Recovery Council and provide recommendations to the council. So I'll provide a little more context for this work that we're going to do. But anyway, I just wanted to share a little bit about me and how I show up. I work with schools a lot. I have not worked in a school. But I have great appreciation for the difficult work that happens in a school every day. So why don't we go this way?
Sure. My name is Nancy Cronin. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Developmental Disabilities Council. And one of the reasons for developmental disability and developmental delay is impact of substance effect in utero. So I am very interested in making sure that children get their needs met, and we assist children who are alive to get their needs met.
Hi everyone, Melissa Hackett. I use she, her pronouns. I wear so many hats, I try to sort them out in an introduction. I do a lot of policy work. I'm at the Maine Children's Alliance, which is a statewide nonprofit. I also support a coalition of folks known as the Maine Child Welfare Action Network. I've been a member of the Recovery Council for a year now. Feels longer than that in a good way. Liz lured me in through the prevention work group. I have a background in public health. I'm really interested in prevention and upstream support for kids and families, and I came to be a member of the Recovery Council because I saw the impact of substance use disorder and the separation of families. So really love bringing people together to do this brainstorming and to really support recommendations around how to move this forward. And excited to be in the company.
When I turn over.
Hi everybody, that's a lot of familiar faces. My name is Atlee Riley. I'm an attorney at Disability Rights Maine, where I've been since 2012. Almost exclusively working on children's related issues, which means mostly education related issues.
So they're not
I started
folks over there
a career, and I thought it would be a long career as a teacher. I taught both special education in 5th grade and got a master's in education, and then for various reasons decided to go to law school to do the kind of work that I'm doing, not really realizing that there aren't many people that do it. So and I'm happy to be here. I'll preface things that I'll say later with nobody calls me when they're happy, so I have a particular lens of like The only windows I get into how things are going are when things aren't going well, because that's when families call lawyers. So I recognize that it's not a complete picture of what's happening in schools,
So what we can do
but
is
it's all I can offer. So that's what I'm here to offer.
It's a good caveat.
Yeah.
We're in more mobile action because we're not in the right spot, apparently.
Oh, I can't see us.
So they can't see us.
Okay.
But we need to move over there.
So it looks like we gotta move over there. Sorry, everyone. We're gonna, let's just do it now, and then we'll continue with our introduction.
This is your movement break.
Yeah,
Very early in the week.
thank you, you all, maybe in schools or with schools, you're flexible, we're.
Special ed, I was gonna say special ed.
Yeah, I'm always ready to finish. No, it could be funny though, if we have music.
Yeah. Catherine, did you packet? I thought I saw some.
Oh, I would love one.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
so
I
much.
thought I saw some sharing over there. And I was like,
Yeah, that was, thank you.
Share.
And is Atlas signing in? Do I need to sign in?
Yeah, there is.
Okay, I'll go
just
sign
in case of a fire
Thank
alarm.
you. Yes.
Does anybody else need a packet? Anybody
Thank you
else
so
got
much.
one? Okay, I appreciate that. Yep.
Humans are funny, did we just mirror image ourselves?
We totally
Tried to,
did.
Yeah, no, this is.
No, I'm messing it up. I'm messing
it up.
Almost. All right. All right, thanks for being flexible, everyone. Thank you. Sure, thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so we all went over here, so maybe we'll go to you, Erin.
Okay. I'm Erin Frazier. I'm the Director of the Office of Special Services and Inclusive Education at the Maine Department of Education. I have a particular interest in this topic. I've worked in pretty different settings, but I also worked up in the Mid-Coast area as a special director there, and was we had a big impact of fetal exposure in that area when I worked there. And for the last few years, I've been working with a researcher out of the University of Rochester to bring some training to the state on fetal exposure syndrome disorders and the interplay of opiate and alcoholism and how that impacts the brain and how that shows up in schools, and the incapacity of many people to diagnose that, and the challenge with diagnosing that too because of the stigma and the shame of that. But so that is work that I've been doing, trying to work on getting some training, and Maine is actually, in researchers in this area, is very in target because of the high level of alcoholism and opiate rate, but also because of the very low identification of FASD in our IEPs. So there's a lot of speculation that students with this particular brain injury have autism. A lot of times they get confused for that, or an intellectual disability, or so just trying to bring awareness and training to the state on that level. So that's why I'm here.
Hi, so my name is Gay McDonald. I'm the Executive Director of MADSAC, which is the Maine Administrators of Services for Children with Disabilities. I have been in this role for 4 years. Prior to that, I left public education after 28 years as a special education administrator and teacher, both general education and special education teacher. Our organization represents 400 different special education professionals, mostly administrators, directors and assistant directors, and CDS site directors across the state. And just, I'm hearing and seeing an increase in special education overall at rates, both developmental delays, but also emotional, behavioral, mental health. I personally am from northern Penobscot area, and Penobscot area is very high rate of opioid use and abuse. And I believe a few years ago, it was like 1 in 5 babies at Northern Light Eastern Maine Medical Center was born addicted. So it is close to an area that I live in addition to my profession. So thank you for having me.
Katie Haas, I'm a special ed director in Southern Maine. This is actually my 30th year in public and private schools in Maine, servicing children with special needs and general ed positions as well. I spent 10 years teaching and the last 20 as an administrator. My doctorate is in public policy, and so I'm interested in the work that we're doing. I also have seen a changing landscape of students who are presenting with issues of prenatal substance addiction and how that is playing out as we see more and more of these students in our schools. So I'm happy to be here as well. I'm also vice president of MADSEC. That's about it, but thank you for having me.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Wilkinson. I'm a faculty member in the special ed department at USM. I also do a lot of work through the DOE and through the PBIS project. A lot of my work focuses on school-wide systems and prevention frameworks. I also teach a lot of pre-service special ed teachers. I've done a lot of work. I've just in local schools in all of these ways. I did some work with Cumberland County last year with some prevention work at Deering High School. So I kind of also play multiple roles, sort of as a faculty member and a researcher and somebody in schools, but I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brendan O'Neill. I'm with the Maine Attorney General's office, and I largely function as the office's attorney to the Maine Recovery Council. So I am not on the Recovery Council, just the lawyer for the Recovery Council, but I know that because of my work as the lawyer, you know, a lot of the details and background about the opioid settlements that, you know, result in this.
I am Elizabeth Fortier. I am the coordinator for the Maine.
Chastity Toole, the executive director for the Maine Recovery Council, formerly was a member of the Recovery Council. And I'll leave it there until Liz tells me to talk again.
Okay, and then we have some folks online. So Pat, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. Welcome all of you. My name is Pat Kimball. I am the current chair of the Maine Recovery Council, and let me apologize. First off, I cannot stay the whole meeting, and I am not an active member of this committee, but I will try to come in when I can. And I look forward to hearing from Liz and Melissa, who are co-chairing this meeting and the progress of it, because we've been waiting a long time to get this group together and to be able to have some impact with these dollars. I'm a woman who is currently retired. I worked for 35 plus years in the field of substance abuse disorders in many, many different roles. Specializing in adolescents and women's issues and also policy development. My last 8-9 years of my career was the executive director to Wellspring, which is located in Bangor, Maine, one of the oldest treatment centers in the state of Maine that serves with a detox residential program, outpatient, intensive outpatient, transitional housing, and a women and children's program. So I know how important this money is to get to our kids and the impact, and to help our schools be able to do their job. So on behalf of the council, I thank you very much for the time you're taking out of your days, and I welcome you. Thank you.
Great, and then Carrie, I'm not sure, oh, you're there, great. Would you like to?
I am. I just have my camera off because I'm picking my daughter up from school. But I'm Carrie Woodcock. I am the executive director for Maine Parent Federation. We are the federally funded parent training and information center for the state of Maine and the Family to Family Health Information Center for the state of Maine. So we help families who have children with different abilities access all systems of care, including special education. I'm also the parent of 2 children who have experienced special education.
Wonderful, thank you. So I always forget that I can't access my Wi-Fi in here, so, it's an ongoing issue for me.
There's another person with call. I don't know if you.
Oh, that's Chastity, that's just.
That's me.
Yeah.
There's like people in the room
Yeah,
who are
you're
also
in the
up there
room
on
or
the
up
tile.
there,
It's a real
yeah, it's like a common.
It's confusing, yeah,
It is.
maybe by design.
So I think today would be great for us, I think in terms of, I think it'd be helpful, it seems like it would be a little bit helpful if we give you a little bit of lay of the land or foundations on the opioid settlement funds, how much funding we're talking about that we have set aside or that the council has to set aside for this work. And so I think those are just like some basic things. I think the goal of this group is really to create recommendations to the council on how they might spend the and really a process for spending the funds for schools. I think I think it's helpful if we go into the sort of basics of the council and some of the work we've done, and then we can ask for if anybody has questions about the MOU that's related to this work. And it's great to have Brendan here because he can really help us understand this MOU that relates to this work better if people have questions. So Chelsea, do you mind just sharing a little bit about the council and where we've been so far and kind of how the money works?
So this isn't showing how I want to, but very basic of Maine Recovery Council and the settlement funds. In general, the settlement funds are 3 buckets. The Maine Recovery Council is the biggest bucket with 50% of those funds. 30% is split up amongst the litigating subdivisions, so counties and towns, and 20% to the Attorney General. Within the Maine Recovery Council's bucket, 3% must go to special education. These numbers, I don't know if they've been updated, but what it looks like, what we have right now for special education funding is 1.25 million. And over the 18-year lifetime, it will be 3.45 million that we need to look at. Basic composition of the Maine Recovery Council. People get appointed in all of these different ways. Also helpful to note is multiple people are going to be termed out in November, so pay attention because we're going to need some new faces. Background on what we've done since the council started, we have put money in lots of different buckets. Roughly 28 million is what has been allocated this year, through this year so far. It's closer to 60 contracts that we have, which is a lot. The council has 2 staff, you're looking at them, and we're housed semi-government within the AG's office, as in they hold our money, they hold all of our contracts for us, process them, but we are not the Attorney General's office. And how we awarded funds, it went across all 16 counties. And we did not do prevention. We did some sole source prevention stuff, and we will have an RFP for prevention work coming up. But our big grant opportunity, where all of these numbers represent, prevention was not included in that. Sorry, I didn't set this up like specifically for today, so.
Sorry, that's my fault.
No, you're okay. Just so when you see me skipping by things. Examples, we've done recovery centers, syringe service programs, treatment across the board. Do you want the full list of stuff?
Sure.
Is that helpful to folks?
We're gonna switch and do a different one.
Or we can send it out later.
We can
if
do
you
that.
wanna see that.
Yeah.
And I'll say, two other things just about the Recovery Council that I think, just in terms of history. When we first started, we did decide to use the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health's principles for the use of the recovery funds. And those principles are still part of the kind of guiding philosophy about the work that we do. And I was just trying to pull them up. Of course, now I can't get to them because, yeah, do you have them?
Yeah.
I can look them up pretty quickly.
While you're doing this, I feel like it's just helpful, even like
Yeah.
larger context, realizing we're all steeped in this more than you all. Maybe you're all in the monthly webinars watching the meetings, but maybe not. This was like really built as we were flying it, right? This structure of the Maine Recovery Council. So a lot of like touching on what Liz shared is like establishing those. These predate me as a member, but just sharing with folks that, you know, what's the 60 contracts that are out now. Like this was also as there was just structure and process being built to make the Maine Recovery Council be what it is, and to establish staff to support it. So just having that context too, is this was a whole new structure that was created to allocate the settlement funds.
And then, and the principles, I just looked them up, it's really easy to find them. Principle 1 is spend the money to save lives. Principle 2 is use evidence to guide spending. 3, invest in youth prevention. 4, focus on racial equity. And 5 is develop a fair and transparent process for deciding where to spend the funding. And so I think this process, we hope, I think when we started, the council has certain members who know lots of things about all sorts of things. And then there are places where we have some gaps on the council. And I think this is a space in which there aren't really council members who have a good handle on what could we be spending the funds on. And also, even if we did, like we did with prevention, I think it's really helpful to get experts from around the state and who have different parts of the story, right, to come together to help us figure out how to spend the funds. And when we did the prevention work, part of the reason why the prevention work wasn't included in that bigger round of an RFP was because we were still in the process of gathering the information from the work group. And what we came up with out of that work group was really, one was a direct funds to the Maine CDC to spend some prevention funds for the 18 to 25-year-old population. But then we figured out we needed 2 other RFP processes for really specific community coalition work and two generational work. So that's kind of still in process. So that's why that wasn't included. So I think one of the things I'll say is like, when we start talking about this problem and the impacts of this problem, it's like so massive. And so I think I can sometimes get into the place of like, well, gosh, it's really not that much money to deal with, you know, even 24 million, when you have 24 million, when the problem actually costs the state about 8 billion in indirect costs and 360 million in direct costs every year. And so, you know, this feels like a drop in the bucket. So I guess I just want to say out loud, since I'm talking, 2 things. One is it's not a ton of money to do this, what's really, really hard work and really difficult things that are happening in schools. But we do also, I think this place and what happens with the council is we do have an ability to be voicing all of these challenges and finding and having my hope is oftentimes a bigger platform for sharing what needs to happen than or another one, right? Like maybe it's happening in the legislature, maybe it's happening in individual school systems or in individual communities. This is just another avenue for us to be able to share all that's happening and what we see is the needs that perhaps help us find funds in other places or other people can use this information to really support addressing the issues. So it is it's a small amount of money, but hopefully we're doing more than just providing guidance to the council, but providing hopefully maybe some guidance to others across the state about what could happen. Yeah, please.
Liz, in your prior experience guiding the prevention working group, based on that, do you expect that this group is going to provide recommendations today, or will there be future meetings?
Yeah, so I think what we have planned is to have 3 meetings. Today, this meeting is to really dig in about what do you all see as kind of the gaps, what are the problems, what are the gaps? And then come together for, that's what I was looking up on my phone, I have it here, we've kind of outlined the 3 meetings. And so the second meeting was really to prioritize the gaps and what are the strategies to impact those priorities. So some pre-work to that might be participants hopefully bringing some ideas about how to address the gaps we talked about today. And then we do need to talk a little bit about how we might ensure the people that get funds from this aren't supplanting, but adding to the work that they already do. And discuss timelines and funding amounts that we want to put forth, or that we would recommend putting forth to the council for an RFP process and actually for giving out the funds. And then meeting 3 would be to review and discuss the strategies and then develop the recommendations to the council. I am hoping we can do it in 3 meetings. We did the prevention one in 5, but it had a much wider focus. My hope is that perhaps this has a narrower focus, and part of the idea is that the council will still put out an RFP, but you all have helped guide what that looks like and what are some of the priorities that should be perhaps given more weight in the reviewing of those RFPs. So I think that's like kind of the plan. I'm wondering if folks have questions about that plan or things you want to add.
Yeah, I mean, we did our best thinking to say, there's always this like urgency of getting the money out the door alongside being really thoughtful about how these funds are being used. To Liz's earlier point, it's not a lot of money in the scope of the challenges, but it is fairly stable money in a context where a lot of other funding sources feel maybe less so right now. So I think just the council's always balancing that sort of urgency to get the funds out to mitigate the impact that we're seeing in the community, and also being really thoughtful about how to do that in a way that is our best combined thinking about what could most use additional funding. So just welcome thoughts about, it was our best thinking at the time of like this many meetings, these are the topics, but would welcome thoughts about the pace and the structure and the components of those meetings from folks.
I had a clarifying question about the grants that have already been issued to several SAUs. That is not special ed specific, obviously, I just probably should have read this before I came.
Full disclosure, everybody's busy, it's okay.
Yeah, so
I don't think you got it.
Oh, okay.
Don't worry.
Oh, okay.
You can find it if you just go to the website, but.
Okay. But I'm just wondering, so that iteration, was that like the attempt to just kind of do some more global school-based community projects, and how was that? What was that, and how's it done?
Yeah, so that actually was national settlement funds, so we didn't do it.
Okay.
It's just that we had some schools in the state who applied for those funds to the national settlement. So I think Brendan's gonna give us a little bit more about that. I think before we get into that, I would love to just review the MOU that sort of guides the Maine Recovery Council funds, which mirrors, except for I think they used an expanded version of what could be funded. So I think I'm not sure if folks had a chance. Yeah, please, Ashley, go ahead.
Question about what you said.
Yeah.
I think you said 320 million annual direct
360.
360.
Yeah. Wow.
Where can I read something that like breaks that down, or like just approaching this, it would be helpful to understand like.
Liz, do you want me to walk through that a little bit?
Do you know where the 360 million comes from?
For the national grant?
No, I think he's asking for the problem.
Yeah.
You mean
You
solve
were
the
saying
right
this is a drop in the
Yes.
bucket compared to the annual
Yeah.
cost of the
So-
state, and it's that.
I can send you like a, that's like, that's not like Maine Recovery Council words,
Okay.
those are mine from
Okay.
a CDC.
Well, it sounded like, oh, I could understand this
Yeah.
better if I knew,
Yeah,
if I understood
so
that number.
I can send you, that is like the CDC did a study across the states to see what is the cost of opioid use disorder. Actually, in particular, it wasn't even just substance use disorder, it was just opioid use disorder. And they did it 2 years in a row, or two times. They did it in like the late teens, and then again, the Democratic Congressional Office used the same technique of the CDC's to decide, to look again in like 2022 about how our states, what is the funding amount that people use, and it's things like healthcare, treatment, jails, law enforcement, and it's really direct costs, prevention, which is usually about 1%. And then they estimated also indirect costs that are like years of life lost, years of productivity lost, and that adds up to about 8 billion a year for the state of Maine. But the direct cost is 360, 80, somewhere in there. And I can send you that report. I find it really, really interesting to
Yeah.
look at.
And that was the national CDC did that of all states.
Yes.
Okay. Yep,
Yeah,
I think that'd be helpful.
yeah, happy to send that to
And
you.
any reports or other documents we can arrange to have posted to the Recovery Council's website so that they're publicly available.
Great. And that one is on a document, it's on some presentations I've done in the past for the Prevention Council where we have the links there, but I'll just send it to you all.
Thanks.
Yeah. I'm not sure if everybody got a chance, it is only 3 pages, but it's a lot, around the, Maine School Administrative Unit's inclusion in the Maine Recovery Fund. We have some guiding, documents that oversee like kind of how we can spend the money, and that's like within the settlement agreements. And so this is one of the, components of that. So I wonder if folks have questions, or if Brendan, you wanna just share with us some highlights of your thinking about the school MOU.
Yeah, and let me, Liz, sometimes I take the long road, so I'm gonna start that way, and you should try to redirect me if I'm taking too long.
Okay.
So-
Everybody knows you started, you said I'm an attorney, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you preface it.
Yeah, and also, while I'm talking, you should all feel free to get up and get more cookies, because I find it useful when I'm giving a presentation to provide a distraction. So, feel free. So everything that the council does, you can learn about after you leave this meeting by going to the Attorney General's website. You click on this link, opioids, and it brings you to the AG's opioid page about the opioid settlements. A sub part of that is the Recovery Council's page, which is here. And that's where we are right now. We're working, helping out the Recovery Council. Also on this page, there's all like these various settlement agreements and background documents about the settlements that provide the funding that we're talking about. So these are funds that came in through like litigating and investigating companies that are in the opioid production sort of chain. And these settlements are 800 pages long each. You're welcome to read them, but they provide the sort of source of the funding that comes in the door. The first 4 links are 2 pairs of memorandum of understanding that decide how the settlement money gets divided within the state. The first one and the third one the first 2 are memorandum of understanding between the AG's office and certain counties, cities, and towns in Maine that were litigated, against these companies. And it basically says, of all the money that comes into the state, 30% will go to certain 39 counties, cities, and towns in Maine, some of which were litigating, some of which were not. 50% goes to the Recovery Council, that's this sort of group. 20% goes to the Attorney General. Then the third and fourth links are the school districts MOU, which is sort of a second tier and says, of the 50% that came into the Recovery Council, 3% of that amount gets held for this special grant program specifically for school districts in Maine. The language here is school administrative units. I think that means school districts.
Yeah, that's what it means.
I just see so many different words used for, but it's, you know, it's for school districts, not individual schools, not for individuals, you know, so anyway. It's worth just taking a heartbeat on saying, of those, that breakup of the money, 50%, 30%, 20%, schools in Maine, school districts in Maine can apply for all of those funds. And this MOU says that, and it doesn't need to say it, it's just true anyway. So, you know, Cumberland County gets a chunk of change. The Portland School District could apply to Cumberland County for a grant from that chunk of change. Similarly, the Portland School District could apply for money from the Recovery Council or from the AG, you know, so this is not the only source of money that school districts could access. But all of the money that comes in on those 4 MOUs from those defendants is reserved, or rather restricted, to be spent on opioid abatement activities. And there's a list in the first 2 links of what those kinds of activities are. It's more of a menu. And then the second, or third and fourth memoranda about the schools further distills the money for this specific grant program for schools. And, you know, again, and if you don't want to write down or don't remember the amount of money we're talking about, right here under settlement payments, you'll find 2 links. One is estimated and the other is actual. The difference between the 2 is estimated will tell you how much money is going to come in. Oh, I forgot to say, this money comes in over a maximum of 18 years at the moment. So through, I think it's started in 2022, so through I think like 2036, 2038. The spreadsheets are built to reflect that flow of money over the 18 years. So the amount of money this group is talking about is not, it's not all in. And some of this work is, I think, intended to help guide how the money is given out over the future. The money was intended to be front-loaded to some degree, so there's kind of a peak, and then it just kind of levels out over the out years. But it's not all in yet, and the amount of money that we're talking about is over 18 years is here. Let me orient you to the, I'm going to pull up this spreadsheet that you're welcome to.
Dramatic pause.
All right. So for those of you who work with spreadsheets, you're looking at the bottom right corner of the spreadsheet. You want to go to the top left where people tend to want to start. It's all the way there. And it's too big for me to show you on the screen, but it basically shows how the money flows. You know, 50% to, here's the total. See, Recovery Council, 50% is here, AG, subdivision. And then as we go along, this is how it breaks out into the 39 subdivisions, counties, cities, and towns. All the way at the end of all that is the 3% for this group's work. And the total amount for all of that is at the bottom. This is my math. I'm wary of being in a room with educators. My formula calculates the expected amount to be in the range of 3.4, 3.5 million over the 18 years. So not, as Liz was saying, the total amount that's going to come in is over here in this category, and I'll show you what that looks like. Currently, we expect that the state of Maine over 18 years will get $230 million. Sounds like a lot, but as Liz has talked about, the problem is much bigger than that. And so it will quickly, I think, seem like a drop in the bucket. The amount this group has to work with from that is 3.45 million. The amount that's in the door right now is on the other link on that page, which is called the actuals spreadsheet. And it shows right here a total of 1.25. That's how much is in the door right now. So that brings us to the MOU. So the Recovery Council was given the job under this MOU of creating a grant program targeting school districts in Maine for the purposes described here. And the grant program is, so the eligible parties are all school administrative units in the state. Does someone here know how many there are?
Yeah, 200. Yeah, it changes every year, but it's around 255, 260.
Okay. A subset of that were school districts, or I'm just gonna call them school districts, that were actually litigating. Similar to the cities and counties and towns, there's a group of school districts that brought litigation.
My district, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, as part of the discussions around negotiating this MOU, the result was that all of the school districts in Maine are eligible for this money. But there is, as you read through this, a reasonable plus factor for the litigated school districts. I think we have a list that is, we don't have to dwell on that. But I think a list exists. Yeah, I'm sure it is.
But the mechanism for that would just be something in the heart of scoring or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's part of what this group will help figure out. But ultimately, everybody in the state is eligible. I'm going to walk through just briefly some of the things that this grant program will need to do. First, the council has to notify, again, all SAUs. From proposals received, the council will select grant recipients. So I'm on the first page here under grant process. An important thing here, this is a flat out requirement, the council will ensure that the funds supplement, not supplant, other school funding. So part of the work is, I think, to figure out what other school funding the applicants have. So for example, we talked about this national grant program that 6 Maine districts received awards from. You'd want to know about that so that you can ensure that, as part of the application process, you ask the applicants to describe how they're going to ensure that it's supplement, not supplant. Grant money must be spent on abatement. That's the menu that I talked about earlier. And again, in all cases, grant applications have to demonstrate that the funds sort of repeating, supplement, not supplant. The second thing is be used to extend and or expand existing services or provide new services above and beyond services already provided. And prior to making decisions, the council needs to consult with an expert in special education selected by the subset of SAUs that is selected by the Maine litigating school administration.
Which is Katie. So that's why Melissa Huey recommended. Okay,
Yes, yeah, now you know why you're here.
I'm understanding better now.
Yes.
Sometimes she does those things and you don't catch on right away.
Welcome.
Thanks.
So just briefly, I said like, you know, early, like in the paragraph above, grant money must be spent on abatement. Above that, under the number 2 in the sort of preamble, it says 3% of Maine's recovery fund shall be earmarked for Maine school administrative units for special education purposes. So I just want to put a pin in that, you know, talk about the fact that it says grant money must be spent on abatement, and then we'll touch base on that again a little bit later. So moving on to the MOU about the allocation, the council will have to publish the criteria for the awards. The council has to direct funding to educational supports. The council needs to aim to maximize impact. So it doesn't have to be a pro rata distribution among the applicants or all the districts. And then there's a series of non-responsive factors that the council must give priority to, which I won't read through. But there are some challenges in there. For example, like the first one, A, applicants from SAUs or consortium units in areas hardest hit by the opioid crisis. So one question is, how do you measure that? And over what time period? Jumping down to the last paragraph, units will be encouraged to apply for funding where it will have the greatest impact. You know, so as the council creates its RFP, it's going to have to, you know, ask about that. And it describes whether for classroom services, school-based behavioral mental services, and structural innovations, or other school-based supports. And I just want to dwell on that and go back to the things that I pinned earlier, which are on the first page, you know, earmarked for special education purposes, and then, you know, also grant money must be spent on abatement, and then also, you know, the greatest impact, whether for classroom services, school-based behavioral mental services, instructional innovations, or the school-based supports. Those three sort of phrases or discussions are the only places that have any sort of substantive guidance for what this money is really meant to be used for. We know that the council's work has to be restricted to opioid abatement as described in the MOU, in the menu of options. But there was sort of, it's not clear that this is meant to be just restricted to special education services, or whether there's meant to be sort of a more broad reading of this. And I think it could be read, you know, a couple of different ways. But in the as you think about this and read through it, remember again, we're talking about 1.25 million at this moment for 260 school districts in Maine. So this group, the council, may wish to target the funds, you know, on a particular focus. So I'm happy to pause there. And I think you would want me to talk about the national grant program as well.
Yeah, before we get to that, I wonder if people have any questions or any.
So I think part of this discussion then about gaps and about like what's going on now is to really help the council then consider what should the focus be? Where could it be narrowed in some way that helps make maximum effort? So that is really part of this discussion. I think it would be helpful if you want to just give a brief thing on the national money that was sent out, and then I think it would be worth us sending that to everybody later after this meeting so we can see what their RFP process looked like. So we don't have it, you probably have it somewhere, but we don't have it with us right this second, but it could be helpful for us.
Okay. So, it sounds daunting to have to create this process. And this is arguably pretty broad sketch of what the work is. Potential good news is that this national grant program may have already done a lot of the work, and you have some ability to look at what they've done as a beginning and to redline it for Maine's purposes. The reason I say that is because this national grant program is based on pretty closely identical criteria. It's the same group of people who represented Maine's school districts as put together this national grant program. And a lot of the priorities and a lot of the language describing what the money's meant to be for is identical or very similar to what is in Maine's own. So you could look at this as a starting point. This is the website, as Liz says, we'll circulate it, but it starts here. And the thing that I found useful was to look, you can see on the top row here, this menu. And I tended to get a lot of value out of looking at the award selection phase documents. This describes the grants that were made to the 6 Maine school districts. And they were made in sort of June, so they're very fresh. What's missing from here is how much they got. I couldn't tell you how much they got. Maybe somebody else will find it, but I haven't been able to find it.
I know that one of the ones I know got about 500,000.
That's the max award.
So they got close to the max. I think I did find the award, the amounts are on the,
Yeah.
I think if you go by, anyway, if you go in there and you go by state and you go to Maine, you can see how much each one got.
Yeah,
And-
so it's possible that information.
Yeah.
What you have in front of you, what I passed out earlier, and we'll email around, is a document that shows this trust's description of the 3 types of grants that were available. And of those grants, what did the Maine districts get? And what was that based on? So it's not just, I'm sorry, I'm not saying it clearly. I took from the bottom document, Appendix G, the summaries. I just copied and pasted the summary of what the 6 Maine districts received based on what they applied for. So the document describes to some degree their application, and with just sort of a concluding sentence from the reviewers about what they found compelling about that particular application. And I include it because, again, it could just be a starting point for this group's thinking. Some of the things that I found, and I don't know this field substantively, but some of the things I found interesting were in reading through the school district's summaries. It sounded like several of them, when they applied, provided information about, like, actual data about how the opioid epidemic impacted their district. And so it could be that the districts, have the data that, or, there could be a process by which, to the extent, sources of information are needed, the school districts seem to have that, or have something that the reviewers in this national process found helpful. So, so that document is just to say, here's what they applied for, and here's what they got. And that could provide, I think some orientation, of or some thinking perhaps about what's possible in this. I'll take 2 seconds, ideally, to talk about a couple other things. So this page here, which is, again, the award selection documents, I found a lot of really great information about what they did. And again, it's very similar to this group's work. The second document, the status report, is to a court. And I mention that because it's worth reading, and because it provides some context for what they did, but the audience is a judge who's providing like oversight. Some of the other documents are more, the audience is people who know the work. And so the other documents may be more useful. One thing I will note is this document here, Appendix B, obviously lists the reviewers. There are 30 reviewers that were national, best I can tell, experts in education respects, one of whom is from Portland. Sarah, maybe this is good.
I was like, Sarah, were you on?
No, that's not it. I think the wrong one. I want to take your time for this. but-
Lots of Sarahs running around.
Yeah.
One of the, anyway, there's someone local who did this work, and you might reach out to her and talk. Yeah. The reviewer's document will give you a sense of the kinds of people who they used to review your grant program. And so Sarah can give you, in theory, some potential, like her take on her experience. One of the things that the trustees summary to the court talked about was they felt that their outreach to school districts was effective. And the reason that they said that was because it was effective in reaching, as they put it, the small, rural, and under-resourced districts most affected by the opioid crisis. I think it's to this group to figure out whether that's, the focus of this group or who you're targeting. Are the small under-resourced districts that are rural the most affected by the opioid crisis? How do you measure that? But there's some guidance there about how to do outreach in a way that can reach all 260 school districts, which I have some information about. I think probably the association might have played a role for different associations. In terms of what kinds of services, I also recommend the FAQs. There's a ton of information in here. For example, what is the intended purpose of the grant? And this is important because it talks in the second sentence, it talks about really two groups of students. One is students that were born with neonatal opioid withdrawal symptoms, as well as students who have suffered traumatic family loss and educational interruptions. So again, getting back to the reading this MOU and is the money targeted for special education? What does that mean? Is, this group, again, a national group, they had a bigger pot to work with. They, made different choices, or they made choices. This group could make a different choice, but it's because they're so similar. I think it's worth thinking about. Again, this national one, they said, somewhere in here it talks about the point, the overall intent. Here, as in this MOU, the national group said the overall intent is for funding where it will have the greatest impact, whether classroom services, school-based behavioral and mental health supports, instructional innovations, or other district or school-based supports. So there are some differences, but very broadly, it's the same. The priorities are the same or similar. It's here. The priorities are the same or similar. There is a little bit of a difference. This MOU, so for example, this MOU talks about Maine's MOU talks about, again, areas hardest hit by the opioid crisis, underfunded SAUs, or those with low per pupil spending, and, critically C, targeting services to children under the age of 8 where the potential gains are highest. The national program did it a little differently, didn't use the under age 8, but did say targeting services to children where the potential gains are the highest. So as you go through it, they're nearly identical. So again, their process may need work looking at. I just want to point out on this page, in addition to the 2 priorities, this trust looked at 2 additional criteria to develop a sort of score for harm or impact. Oh yeah, these are the priority elements. So for example, if you compare these to the MOU that you have in front of you, again, geographic areas or district most affected, low per pupil spending. Here's that third category I was talking about, vulnerable students or categories of students with potential gains are likely to be highest. There's a lot in here about sustainability, about supplement lots of plan, things like that. In addition to these priorities, the trustee focused on two data sets used to determine impact, and those are shown here on the screen. One is this ARCOS data, which is misspelled here. ARCOS has 1A, and it's an acronym for something about a data set from the Federal Drug Enforcement Agency. This is publicly available data that is commonly used in opioid settlements to try to identify where a lot of opioids went. I think it's only available at the county level. There's various people have strong opinions about it, but basically it takes all opioids that are prescribed and creates an equivalence of morphine milligram equivalents, and that means to basically say 10 milligrams of OxyContin, is equivalent to 5 milligrams of fentanyl, or maybe it's 80 to 5 or whatever. It's meant to equalize that. So there's a uniform way to measure how much opioids went into a given game. The other harm indicator, or the other impact score indicator, is neonatal absence syndrome birth data. So I want to just highlight these two because this is what, as you go through these documents, you'll see that they use this to evaluate the applications. And in Maine's districts that applied, they got very high scores for these two impact data sets. This may be information, if you're interested, you might want to contact the trustee to learn more about these sources and how they use them. And I have a limited ability to, or no ability to really help you kind of figure out how to use that information. And then I talked about the reviewers. Lastly, I will show you here the trust application phase. Again, there's FAQs and then the process documents. When they did outreach to the school administrative units, they included the link for the request for proposal. And these documents, again, could be a starting point for this group's work. You could look at it and say, we're going to reduce this, but use the same thing. You may want to talk to these folks. You may want to talk to the school districts that got money, and so forth. So it's a potential blueprint for it.
Great, thank you. And I'll just say a few things. One, I think it's great to have this that we can go to, especially when we're looking at once we've determined what some of the gaps are and prioritize them, say like, okay, are there things we could use here? I think I do wanna say that the council, the way that the settlement agreement is in Maine, the council has to make decisions about where the funding goes. And so part of the reason we want to do this work of really perhaps narrowing or coming up with some key priorities is that the council does not have expertise like those reviewers did to review that and know how to score. And so we just don't. We don't have that. And so I think partly to like narrow the scope or at least say you all as experts in this work think these should be the priorities and perhaps have more points than something else is really important as the council goes to do their work as people who really aren't experts in this. And so I think that is I see as the largest distinction between what we're doing here and that. We can use that as a blueprint, but the council won't know how to score it unless this group tells them really pretty clearly, like, here's how you wanna score impact. Here's what we think are the key priorities.
Yeah, and for the prevention work group, we created a whole document that was like, this was our discussion, this is why folks arrived at these recommendations, so that the council had that context in thinking about what the recommendations were and how to score things. So I do think the more detail we can give, the council has been grateful for that expertise.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes, no shade on the council, it's just like
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
how it is, like where they have to make the decisions and yet they aren't necessarily the ones with the most knowledge about how to do that, and especially in this case with the school dollars.
And the council's work could also, in the same way as the prevention work, to the extent it's made public, it could be a resource for the, counties, cities and towns who got their own money, because that in a lot of those communities, it's one person who's sitting at a desk who this lands on their table and they are asked to figure out what to do with it. And like, so to the extent that the council is able to make available or gather data, or here's the scope of the problem, here's what this group's, and so forth.
Yeah, and we have made use of the Moss Center that is part of USM. They are they're collecting a lot of the information and providing support to the subdivisions on how to spend their money. And they like took our prevention document and have provided it to all the subdivisions and said like, hey, you could use this as a model for how you would spend your prevention dollars. So the same thing could be true here, where it could be used to influence the district or at the county and town level. So with that said, I feel like we have a good if people have questions, I wanna just leave time for some questions. And then I would love to get to like, what do you all see as kind of, what do you see? I think we wanna air some of that out so we all I'd love to know more.
And are there sort of requests for information, like
Yeah.
Brendan pointed out a few data sets, are there other data sets people are aware of that we might share with the group for consideration in terms of how we're thinking about impact, those kind of things, even if you don't have the answers, but you have questions that we might be able to help support more learning.
And Liz referenced the Johns Hopkins document, which is available on the link from from the agency, from that opioid website.
We can include that
Yeah.
link in the notes.
Yeah. So anyone have questions before we kind of jump into doing some sharing?
Just, can you add that document, the prevention group, did you already say you're gonna?
It's not brief, but we're happy to share.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just.
We also, the prevention
Because at
one,
first I'm listening to that and I'm thinking, well, there's already something that's going on, like this sounds like, and it's aligned. And then I'm hearing you say, no, we need something much more targeted, and so this seems like a good example. Or is this the example you'd like us to work toward, like kind of something like with the prevention?
well, I think that I'm not suggesting we don't use that, I'm suggesting it may be that that's a basis, but we might need to provide a lot more prioritization and guidance with that RFP process. The prevention work group, we had the huge benefit of the New England PTTC, it stands for Prevention Training and Technology Center. They were willing to do it with us, and so they supported a lot of the backside, like we did a lot of the work and then they were able to like create the document. You know, it's me and Melissa this time, so I don't think we're gonna necessarily be able to do to that extent.
I don't need it then, I'll just read that. So.
Okay, but you should still, I think looking at how we base the recommendations though, I think could be helpful.
Yeah, because again, to Liz's point, it's no shade at the council. People have the expertise that they do there. The reason we pulled together this work group is because we don't feel we have that expertise in the existing membership. And so to the degree that we can give some of that context and background to them, it was helpful to Liz and I to be like, this is what the group means by prevention, and this is why we narrowed in on these topics. So some kind of background might be helpful. I don't know if it'll be as extensive as the document we created, but I think it could give you an idea of the sort of context setting we would want to do with the council to understand the way the group approached the work and why you all decide to narrow in on what you narrow in on.
So given that we have an hour, I would love to just take maybe 3 minutes if people want to use the bathroom, get some water. I'm conscious of sitting for a really long period of time.
And we threw a lot at you.
Just 3 minutes, let it settle in. Yeah. And we only have an hour, so I do want to then come back and have people share. Does that sound okay? Okay.
You can speak for yourself.
When I need to, yeah.
So I try to combine like specific with what they said.
But yeah, it's like, so it's a totally different structure. It's not going through central intake.
Yeah. Like, it's so
Years
hard.
people said, yes, but for years people said, all the hospitals. So like a lot of the states.
That's a tiny group. Yeah, obviously, but like even like how they break down. But maybe
I did something. Shoveling the other day, it was like, it just will not go away.
and like a lot of stuff. You know,
Right.
found stuff from Johnson.
The longer I sit, the worse it gets. Yep. It just goes right out.
Yeah, I can feel it in traffic.
Yeah, it's like, it's in like this driving.
Yeah, yes.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, no, this is. Sprinkles are always a good choice. It's not going away like that.
Permission to go get a second one?
I'll join them. No, you can't do that. No, right. So.
They are good.
was like, I just grabbed something before it came in.
It may have been
Oh.
I don't. I feel like I see this like. You have.
Yeah,
So like,
totally.
so I think where she might go with the lens of expertise of also like
This environment.
Right. Okay, so I think we'll just get started again. I think they can join in when they're back. I think we'll, because really this is like, this discussion really now is for us. I'm wondering, I did come with some key agreements, because that's how I am facilitator wise. We forgot to talk about them. We can walk through them. I feel like perhaps we don't need to. This is just a way for us to support each other in this discussion. So if people want to add something or you don't like something, we can take it off. If people are okay with these agreements, we can just like thumbs up it. Okay, great. Okay, great. So I would just open the floor for anyone who'd like to start. I think this is, if folks came thinking they wanted to give more of a presentation, you're welcome to. If you'd like to just share your thoughts on, the landscape of what's happening in schools and in school districts and how that the work of either special ed or how the opioid use disorder is showing up in for children who've been impacted. So I'd love for us to just start of like, what's the landscape, and I can be kind of parsing out what are gaps and what are the issues. And I think if you wanna share, we can just start. If somebody wanna start us off.
They did a survey of special ed directors across the state,
Oh, amazing.
so she has some good data.
Good data.
Great.
Interesting, I compiled, a lot of it was the same. Hearing the higher number of behavioral challenges, mental health, social emotional needs. Kind of if you're thinking about that landscape of special education, that's what they're seeing. Intensity of the behaviors themselves and the mental health needs in regards to aggression, threats, weapons, bringing weapons to school. People are reporting seeing those are different types of behaviors or more frequent occurrence than what has ever been seen in schools before. An increase in younger children in verbal aggression, sexualized behaviors, and vulgar language, seeing a higher level of that. Higher referral rates for special education, as well as a higher rates of identification of special education. Increase in number of students being admitted for hospitalization, either the emergency room and staying there for long periods of time, places like Acadia Hospital and Bangor. High levels of poverty, students coming in, high levels of poverty. Kind of a shifting in the disability proportion, or at least in the programming from the learning disabilities into more of that behavioral mental health. That's all associated with that. Shifting in special education programming in departments, that it's almost becoming community centered based versus an educational basis, I would say, in that they're sharing that there's a lack of community supports and in-home supports for families. So schools are kind of taking that on as well. And in special education teachers are trained in education. They're not clinicians and needing to be functioning as clinicians when they don't have that training. The role of the parent has changed in students, because it's being filled by grandparents or other caregivers because parents aren't able to take care of students. Lack of parent engagement through the IEP team process and their students' education. And then rates of autism, and someone had a question, is what is or is there a connection between opioid use during pregnancy and autism? And Katie, you can add a little bit more to that too.
Yeah, I would say, and it goes back to something Erin was talking about earlier, and that is that there's the environmental piece, right, and the family piece, and the students who are, going home to parents who may not be available because of their substance use and maybe food isn't available or whatever, and they're living in really hard conditions. And so we see those students. We also see students who have been exposed and were born addicted, and some of those students present very similarly to students with autism. Because when you're diagnosing autism, it's a series of checklists and a series of interviews and so forth. It's not like a blood draw or something, right? And so the tools that we're using to identify students with autism, some of the characteristics of students who are born addicted are meeting some of those indicators of autism. And so I think our school psychologists are having trouble differentiating, which is why I know Erin we did one, I think it was last year, that you brought a team in to work with our school psychologists in Maine around thinking more about this. But I think, over the last couple of decades, we've gotten a good solid handle on working with kids with autism in the schools, and also working with kids that have emotional disabilities and trauma. But the kids that were born, now we're seeing kind of COVID kids and kids that have come up through this increased wave of addiction in our state, and they present not only like with those developmental disabilities that are similar to autism, but a neuropsychologist who works with us talks about how their sensory system remembers what they went through or what they went through early on, even if they're not recalling. And how that plays out is that they are constantly in this state of like high alert, right? And it's like this, and so they have difficulty focusing, they're very jumpy, anxious sort of all the time, and so it's a different layer than what we're used to typically with kids with autism and developmental disabilities or trauma. It's like this next layer that I think our teachers and our psychologists and our therapists and social workers are trying to navigate. And we're seeing more and more every year.
Okay, would you be willing to share some of the results of that so we can have it more?
Yeah, I can send that.
I was gonna
That would
ask
be
about the
great.
number of
Yeah.
respondents, but I think the themes and takeaways would be helpful too.
Yeah, I can send, I just sent it out to our board, not the whole state.
Oh, it only
I
went
just
to our
sent it
board?
to the board,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so, but I can
That would be really
certainly,
helpful,
yeah,
thank you.
send that. And I think just backing off what Katie was saying, I think what the main theme, and a lot of people, when I just asked too, they didn't do written back to me, is that you used to see fewer students that would come from those homes where you knew there was typically alcohol abuse, right? Or possibly some drug use. And over the past 5 to 8 years now, it's many more students that are living in those situations where the parents can't care for their child because of addiction. And so they're always in survival mode, but it's not 1 or 2 students in your classroom, it's 5 or 6 or 7 in your classroom. So that shifts the dynamics immensely, and I think that is, we're saying we see parents that are addicted on a day-to-day basis. I mean, even when I had parents that came to meetings And we knew when we had to they were like, you can't take your child home with you, right? Because we knew that they were under the influence, so how do we support that person? And it happened several times, and making sure that everyone is safe. And I think that's a very common theme now that schools are seeing, that you didn't see 8 or 10 years ago.
We're now all doing Narcan training so that we can, and it's not for the kids, it's because parents may be in the parking lot and have passed out and we need to respond, or they are on site for an event. And we just want to be able to respond if we need to. So like our administrators are all getting trained. We have Narcan on, you know, as a regular staple in our nurse's office and in our main offices. So it's just a different landscape.
I have a couple of thoughts. Oh, I'm sorry.
After you.
Right
ahead, oh gosh.
I might forget it if I don't talk about it now.
Right ahead.
So the problem with linking this to special education is that very few children in special education are identified with this, right? It's a very ancillary or connected problem that's kind of more global, and it's also kids who aren't identified, right? It's kids who are being really identified with, what's the thing that's not a disability? Oppositional defiance, right? So that's a really, well, that is, yeah, so anyway, lots of people will say that is not a disability, and they would not, even though there is likely a disability or some kind of a brain difference there. So I struggle with just making this about special education because of the lack of identification of this confluence of like, and the pervasiveness of it, right? Like teachers need to know these skills beyond special education. So I really think that one thing that we should focus in here is really looking at the educational professionals, and I'm talking about all educational professionals, having an understanding of the attributes of someone who may have an impact of a fetal exposure disorder, and recognizing the accommodations and tools that would support working with that child, which would work for special education, but it would also work with other children who may not be identified. So that's one prong of this, is just trying to make sure that our professionals, including our professionals like our physicians, our pediatricians, have an understanding of what attributes are likely to occur in someone who has that specific exposure disorder. And school counselors, mental health providers, but also teachers, you know, understanding and having some tools to be able to support students because oftentimes it's not identified on an IEP. It's just not, even though people might know it happened and they might have a history, or someone knows somebody who knows something, or, you know, it's not in the IEP, which is problematic. So you have to kind of take a universal approach. I think it should be in the IEP, and it should be more highly recognized, and that's the training thing that would have to come with our school psychologists, the people who are kind of making these identifications. But the other really huge area of focus, I think, should be early intervention and early childhood special education, because that's where the early care centers, are experiencing this unbelievable heightened behavioral need there. And thank goodness we're expanding early childhood special education programming, but our referrals are through the Workgroup. We have one of the highest identification rates in the country. And unless you have you know, when you are going down that path of special education, you're waiting for everything to fail. And then, you know, you have to have an adverse effect before you can qualify for special education. So I just think, like, in terms of abatement, that has to be kind of an early intervention, early childhood special education approach to being able to really address specific instructional strategies and accommodations that are specific to that type of a brain injury. And also train your professionals in the state to recognize when that associate set of behaviors and or challenges and or cognitive issues and or learning issues are presenting themselves, to really tease that out in the process of identifying a disability and then also incorporating it into the plan, because the treatment for a person with an emotional disability, for instance, if you're not taking that into consideration, there could be really big implications of lack of appropriateness of treatment. So that's just, I always think about, the biggest impact is training all the people who work with kids all day, and I mean all the people in a school. Who, because I think everybody is a special ed teacher personally, even people who work like at the front desk, But that would be my wanting to get this into some type of training into like our people who are going into the homes in early intervention and how they can start to understand if some of these things are present within this family or within this child that may, need further consideration. So that's kind of how I have been, because again, it's not in our IEPs. It's just not. It's not there. It's not where you're gonna find maybe you will, but it's rare, I mean, we had, when I left Rockland, I think we had 50 kids coming in from CDS at the time. And 50% of them were impacted in utero exposure. And that was back in 2013, so it was, it was just such a profound problem. And without getting people like the schools, the tools to be able to really treat that effectively, I think it's just gonna be kind of a mismatch of understanding in terms of the intervention for a student.
I have a lot of thoughts. One of the things that we are absolutely seeing is a tremendous amount of dysregulation of children and young children, and an increased level of ACEs. I don't believe we're going to be able to actually pinpoint, this is the child that had in utero exposure. We're going to have a percentage, but we're not going to be able to do that. However, especially in fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, when you look at what is the percentage of people who are identified with ADHD is actually very common. The reason they're identified with ADHD is because it's these checklists. And nowhere in Maine do we actually have this is a treatment for a child with substance affected disorder specifically, or it comes out in symptoms, so you get a different label. And the problem with these different labels is, frankly, you start putting evidence-based practice based on that other label. When you're really not dealing with that label, you're dealing with brain injury. So I think it's really important. We're not going to actually have an identification because it doesn't exist anywhere really formally connected to services. You have things connected to services for other autism, ADHD, whatever. But the reality is you need to really be teaching an individual different levels of coping skills, because where a child with a neurological disability like ADHD or autism, in which you're going to be able to shift and adjust how that brain is developing, you're not going to be able to do that in the same way with somebody with kind of a brain insult. You're going to have to teach different levels of coping to be able to prevent things like later on using themselves or criminal behavior or whatever. So we really need a much better understanding about what are some strategies of teaching different kinds of coping skills for that. How do we identify these things and things like that. Caregiver training, there is quite a bit of research out there that is very, very promising, frankly, about how do you work with and raise a child who is presenting with a lot of these disruptive behaviors. I think it would be nice to be able to get some of that training in for schools. Our restraints and seclusion rates are going up sky high, and one of the worst things you can do is restrain or seclude a child who has one of these brain insults. because basically what you're going to do is just gonna go through the roof. So I think we need to be able to have, how do you identify when it might be one of these brain insults? What are some different strategies for coping, to teach coping skills? How do you teach parents how to address and deal with these different behaviors? And let's be honest here, if an individual is using, then they don't have the coping skills themselves. So you have to be able to do both. Yeah, there's a lot in here that's really, really important. But the fact that I talked to a teacher, a district recently, and they said when they started in their field, in this field, like 20% of children needed assistance in regulation. And 80%, you were just focusing on being able to provide the instruction that you needed, and it's almost like 2/3 now are needing that. It's really this rather dramatic thing. Does this need to be focused specifically on special ed? Somewhat, in that it might be an individual who's incorrectly identified. You wanna look at it. By the same token, it can't just be it, because you are dealing with a pretty serious community problem right now that's increasing lots of behavior that sometimes you don't want to incorrectly.
So I know we've lots of other comments. Nancy, you mentioned a specific training for caregivers around coping skills with their children. Is that something you could share with your group?
Yeah, actually,
As people are talking about different things, if you have examples, I think it's helpful to be able to share that.
It exists at DHHS. They have a number of gosh,
You don't have to be
coming into my brain.
Yeah.
But there's others, and like talking a little bit to like Dr. Tweed about specifically what is the evidence based usually around, but I'll do that. I'll find them for you.
And I would welcome that from others.
Family
that talk
checkup
about
is
this.
one evidence-based family checkup. It's called family checkup.
Family checkup.
Yep.
And my person that I'm connected to the University of Rochester has a parent based evidence-based parent training and access to a tool that can support home.
Incredible Years also has a parent.
It would be really interesting because I haven't seen much research about how do you take some of these practices and teach teachers how to use some of them. Like, what is transferable?
I have a study on that, because
Do
we
you?
had one of her graduate, one of her people in her PhD program did a teacher web app for how to provide interventions exclusively for fetal exposure. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work being done that, that I'm personally like trying to bring into the state, just because I think, when I had a conversation with with Bear Shea, who probably all of you know, because he's famous.
That was wonderful.
Who really leads our.
Many hats.
Yes, he has the mental health community out there, but he would say that, he's woefully undertrained in this area, and so are most people, because it's not present in, it wasn't present in or highlighted in preparatory programs for school counselors and social workers, and so you get like a little bit of information on it, but you don't really have the the perspective of what are the interventions how are they different from like someone with ADHD?
Yes.
How are they different for, than someone with autism? Because you're right, like the way that you can impact this is different because of the fact that it's, like a brain injury, so.
I'm mindful that Carrie had oh, sorry, and then
No, that's
Sarah,
okay. I can wait.
and Natalie, you all three still have to go, so, please go ahead, Carrie, did you wanna?
I think you just sent it in the chat.
Oh,
We do.
in the chat, I agree with Erin. Oh, go ahead, Carrie.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it was what Aaron and what Nancy were saying. I mean, a big problem is the identification, and usually the students who get identified are the students who are with adoptive and foster families, because there's no shame or blame, because those parents are are the parents who are where the child has landed after the brain injury has occurred. And then it's really hard to get identification for students where parents may still be using the drugs within the home, or even if they're in recovery. There's just a lot of stigma and shame and blame around that. And then they're getting labeled, as you guys mentioned, as oppositional defiant behavior kids, and it's discipline that's being used as opposed to interventions that could really make a difference in that child's life, or the completely wrong diagnosis, as we've talked about before. So, um, I think efforts towards proper identification, but also understanding some of the barriers you're going to run into is the stigma that those parents who may have been the ones who have used have faced, and really trying to put into place things that can help overcome that shame and blame game for those parents, especially if they're in recovery.
Great, thanks for naming that,
Yeah.
Carrie.
Sarah, would you like to share?
I just wanted to share, I also have some data about some behavior in Maine schools. I emailed it to you while I was sitting here, so you have it. And it reinforces a lot of what folks have already said, but that it's a pretty wide sample, so I think that that's helpful. It's over 3,400 Maine educators input, but I think a couple of the things that just to look at some of the comments that have been made already in different ways. I think one thing that those data show, and I hear a lot in and out of lots of different schools, is this idea that this is a special education problem when that really it's much wider than that. And I think one of the unintended consequences of that is I have lots of reports of special educators being pulled from their jobs to handle these behaviors with general education students. In and of itself, great, that's a person who might know how to handle it. And that means they're not doing their job. They're not providing special education if they're being pulled to support other students in that moment. I think there's also another real lack of sort of training we have across the state is, and Erin alluded to this a little bit, but in just regular behavior management strategies. So there's these specific interventions, yes, but also good classroom management, whatever you want to call it, whatever the word of the week is for what classroom management is, supports these students when they're not in their intervention time, right? And we don't have requirements for that. We don't have a clear idea. Schools are not clear on what evidence-based classroom management are. And that's hurtful for all students, but particularly harmful for students who are already struggling in getting these other interventions. These other interventions are great and we need them. And absent of good classroom strategies and practices generally, they're not going to have the same effect. And that is across the board. I agree with Erin, everybody should be trained in all of these things.
Yeah. Everybody should be on.
Yeah,
because
like any
everybody
adult,
is,
all the adults. I don't care if they're the lunch lady, whoever it is. But I think that those are the people kids are interacting with. And those are those informal things that are going to set off behaviors outside of those intervention times. Those are when the tests happen to use the coping skills. In the survey of educators, we also found less than 8% of educators reported ever having any training in teaching students skills. So Nancy was talking about teaching coping skills. We can't have 6% of teachers knowing how to teach skills.
And we can't have someone pulled out to go see a
Right.
school counselor to get a skill.
Right.
When they're, and not having it.
Yeah, so I think it's a bigger, there is this special ed problem, but it is this wider interconnected thing. And I do think some universal trainings on basics would go a long way in prevention for some of the other problems and would also support and make better effects, I would guess. I mean, I bet my degree that the effects of these interventions would be better if the rest of the environment was also stronger.
Because I think if you're a child coming from a home where there's an addiction and there's trauma, and you're coming from the chaos and your needs aren't being met, and you're coming into a setting, possibly your classroom, that doesn't have the skills, you're moving from one chaotic environment to another chaotic environment. And I think that whole school, instead of siloing general education and special education, they're all students and they're everyone's students in the school. So think that this group needs to think about that and what you're thinking about with the funds. Is it special education, only special education? Because that's a silo again. They also see that there are students that are in special education that have high acuity levels and needs
Increasing.
that are increasing, that are beyond that general sense that we are talking about this conversation right now. So I see two things: that overall school culture of understanding the trauma and the experiences, and when you're in survival mode, you're not learning, you can't learn, your brain cannot do it. Highly dysregulated, but also there are students that have experienced severe trauma and their nervous systems are shot and they need help now. And so I kind of see two different things there.
I'm wondering, Natalie, you want to share some of your
Oh
thoughts?
boy. So, again, prefacing this, nobody calls me when they're happy. But what am I seeing out there? Well, another thing I wanted to flag, we've kind of gone back and forth a little bit in the discussion. I would say I work with many times more students who were not impacted in utero themselves, but are just impacted by the environment that they're living in. So I mean, when we're thinking about this, one way to target it would be only for people within utero exposure. But what I'm saying is like a lot of that, the list you were ticking through, those kids are often like, at least the ones I'm working with that fit under all those increasing arrows you were saying, more often than not, that isn't necessarily the issue. It's more trauma related to the environment and things like that. So at some point we'll need to figure out which or both are. But what I'm seeing from the student and family perspective is I believe that schools right now are engaged in triage, and the kids we're talking about are getting pushed out. And they're getting pushed out in a lot of different ways. Sometimes they're getting pushed out by, they don't get identified as having needs until pretty late. And by the time they're 13, then people will say, oh, you're just conduct disorder. You're a behavioral kid. But a lot of those kids, they're the kids who are coming in at 6 years old from CDS. Those kids are now getting to be parents. We have to work with everybody. And the families are not feeling like the schools are working with them. And they're feeling like they're a burden to the schools. That's how when people call me, they feel like that their child is a burden. That's how they're feeling, from the schools, that their child and their child's needs are a burden on the school. And the children, younger and younger kids, even though we've got some legislation that says you can't suspend kids, except in really rare circumstances, 5th grade and below, we're seeing lots and lots of exclusions. We're seeing families show up for kindergarten and then them saying like, we don't have a teacher in our life skills classroom. And so we need to hang out for a while till we find a special purpose private school for you. We'll see if we can find a tutor. And these are families that, I just have this radical idea that like all children should be in school all day, every day. And that especially the children who we're concerned about their home environment, we shouldn't be sending them back to that environment, but we're doing that because we're in a triage mode, I think, a little bit and I don't disagree with all those things people told you about, that things are going up and increasing, but where I do maybe part a little bit, and it goes part to what you all found with that survey, Sarah, is like, we're putting children with maybe higher needs, maybe not, but we're putting them in classrooms with people who aren't prepared to meet those needs. And then we're saying like, well, you're not, and I don't know if it's because they have higher needs or they're just basically responding to an environment that basically, without trying to, these are filled with caring people, but they're responding to an environment that is traumatizing to them in some way. And then that people don't know how to react to the response. And so it's this trampoline effect. And it's because, and I can hear and with your survey and all the stuff that you're hearing, everybody's so overwhelmed. And so what I'm seeing, and maybe it's only the people who call me, and so it's a small number, but schools are really kind of, they're just like, we can't, you need to go over here and wait until Margaret Murphy can meet your needs, or until, someplace an hour and a half away and on a bus can meet your needs. And we've kind of gotten to be okay with that. I don't think this money is gonna shift that, but I think that's right now, to the extent we're trying to do an environmental
Yeah.
landscape,
Yeah.
that's kind of where, where it feels like things are so acute right now that these students we're talking about who have some of the more acute needs are the least likely to have those needs met right now. The higher your needs, the least likely you are to have them met, I feel like, in schools today.
I think you're right, and I think part of that is because of the overwhelm and the unpreparedness. Little things are seeming like a high need, and then the high needs aren't being addressed because we can't handle the small needs.
Well, and I think to Nancy's point, years ago, it's one thing if you're in a classroom and you have one or two kids with really acute needs, right? But, whether it's a lack of training or an increased need, I think just the volume of students is also contributing to difficulty meeting all of their needs, right? And so I think the other thing that Atlee talked about was, we don't have a teacher for our life skills classroom. The shortage areas in this state in special education are really real. I mean, I would say real, like special education teachers, especially our most intensive needs teachers, therapists, school psychologists, although we seem to be turning the tides a little bit on that.
We're churning those guys out now, but that took years, and yeah, people are walking away from the profession because, I just was in a training with teachers, and there was this little breakout session where they were saying, how have the last 5 years been since COVID? And I felt like we needed therapists and triage and like these people were crying, they were traumatized, and I was like, no wonder it's not going well in your classroom because you need support. So I went back and I was like, we need to help the teachers understand how to provide supports because they are just feeling like they're in it
Support
alone.
them.
Yes.
I think one of the other things our survey shows, we had a burnout inventory and some data around teacher well-being as well. And dysregulated teachers can't effectively help dysregulated children.
Right, exactly.
And I've got to advocate,
Adults.
and I think,
Right, adults in general,
a lot of
yeah.
times it is, when we talk about teachers, we're also talking about paraprofessionals and ed techs. But
Yeah,
I'm not
I was
sure
using that
that,
term
I feel that in here.
Yeah.
But I think in some schools, there is a hierarchy of teachers and ed techs are very different. But I think we have to include the ed techs because they are direct with the student in many ways. And you know what, a number of years ago, there was a lot more general education ed techs. And now, and they were supportive, and now there's less money, lots of reasons, but it would be nice to have more.
Well, parent training is included in special education, and I feel like that could be an angle too with thinking about these recovery funds and special education and how we could support parent understanding of, I'm working right now on a school avoidance training with a very, very good psychologist in Maine to kind of work on the parent front, like Carrie, going through Maine Parent Federation and doing a training that way, but also, for people to understand why children are avoiding school. So I just think parent training has to be a component, bringing the parents in to, like you said, not help them feel like they have some agency and kind of advocating for their kids and that they're not like this burden.
For those that aren't familiar with special education law, the parent counseling and training can be a related service under special, okay. And anytime it's my favorite thing to do when schools are blaming the parent, be like, well, I don't see any offer of parent counseling and training here,
I think that goes back to the preparation for that.
Yeah.
Preparation to be prepared to provide that service. I think that's one of the gaps that we talked about that came through here was being prepared.
Yeah.
Teacher, prep.
Carrie, did you want to say something?
I was just gonna say, I wanted to sort of bring us back to the population that we're working with. We're always happy to do parent training, and oftentimes when we do parent training, we work with a parent and then they go to the IEP meeting and we're present just as a support person. a lot of times our navigators, as they're walking out the door, will get asked for cards for the program from the school district because the meeting has gone fairly well because the parents are educated and we try to meet in the middle. But I want to also, this year we did some really intense parent training through the Department of Health and Human Services, the Ruby training. And it was extremely intense for parents. It was very involved, and the dropout percentage was pretty significant because of what was being asked of parents. And I don't think the state has pursued an ongoing contract for the Ruby training, but that was teaching parents skills onto how to deal with the advanced behaviors in their home. So that's just something to consider, and it might be worth asking DHHS for their numbers on how successful that was in the dropout rate. But I also want to bring it back to the parents that you're working with who may be dealing with their own rehabilitation and drug use may not be ready for a parent training, or we have to find ways in which we can access them in a family-friendly way so that they would be open to it, but we're not asking so much that they become overwhelmed and it's detrimental to their recovery as well. So that's something that Maine Parent Federation hasn't pursued, but I'm happy to work with this coalition and any expertise in maybe if other states are doing that type of parent training with families who are experiencing drug use and drug rehabilitation, because I think there's probably a different way to go about it than our normal way. And that's just sort of what my gut is saying. So I'm just saying that we're open at Maine Parent Federation to getting additional resources to be able to help families that you might be encountering through this program.
I wonder about models like early childhood consultation, like that's like the teacher, the parent, the child, like it isn't just the parent getting the training or the school getting the training, it's like how are we having a shared understanding of what's happening at home for the child and at the school for the child.
Well, and I think that's really important because, I've been really struck by the amount of what I see as moral injury everywhere right now, just teachers and ed techs and parents and everybody they're kind of in this culture of heightened sensitivity and trauma. There really is, and I think we need to look at that culture a little bit, because as one of the things that this opiate crisis has affected our communities with is simply not knowing how to, we're triaging. It's exactly what Adley said. We're always in the response. We're always, the child is running. We're doing this. How do we do this? And we're trying to make sure we're hitting our Marzano and our learning results. And there's all this stuff all the time, and parents are worried about working and being able to put food on the table. There is a lot going on right now in this culture that is just overwhelming. And if you're talking about a culture that started using to be able to survive, then you impact everything that's gone on in the last 10 years. Holy moly.
Just I know we're running low on time, but I do think there's another population we haven't really addressed, which they're not always older, but middle school, high school students that are also using drugs.
Absolutely.
Like we haven't really talked about them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about them at all, but I do think that's another population. I don't know. I haven't looked at the MIAS data recently, but like some of those data are pretty stark, like pretty scary.
Actually, we did just look at them and it's pretty amazing. I will say there's been a lot of improvements.
Oh,
It's good. But it just came out about 2 days ago about the effect of marijuana and the higher level of THC and how that's affecting the brain and directly connecting to psychosis and challenges.
And I wonder, they don't disaggregate by special ed status though, right?
They don't.
think so.
No, but I will say one of the things that we keep seeing, that we've seen over the last 5-8 years, is as the rates of substance use amongst young people have gone down,
those who do use, they're using at higher rates. So
Yeah.
it ends up seeming like more are doing it. It's actually that the ones who are doing it, it's so cute and so intense. But we haven't been able to, we can't do that data, looking deeply at the data like that. We have to get it analyzed to be able to see. Okay, so because we have seen, generally speaking, the new 2025, I looked at Cumberland County, I haven't looked at the state data,
Even if it's
but
decreasing, like
it's
it's not zero,
decreasing.
so there are still
Are
these
you
students.
just opiates or are
All
you
of it.
increasing
'Cause it-
like
yeah, alcohol.
Because it has all the
and
different
marijuana?
cannabis,
Yeah, that's a big.
So all substances have gone down, and actually mental
That's
health
great.
rates have improved as well. Not all statistically significantly, but at small levels. But I do think it's again we wanna look at, okay, so now of those who are using, how many days a month are they using? Because we saw that those who are using every day in a month went up significantly over the last 5 years.
Okay, so
We
that's so
also-
scary, like.
If you,
Right.
Amy Mayhew and they just did a Project Echo of the connection between initial psychosis event and marijuana. It was just about 2 days ago, Maine AAP, and the number of folks having first psychosis earlier has increased.
Oh, absolutely.
In Maine, so there's that other kind of piece that's going on.
I guess that's the like non-prevention side,
Well,
but it's
yeah, I
also
was gonna
important.
say,
It is
like,
not-
thinking about what bucket, because we
Right.
did an allocation in the prevention around a higher risk population of 18 to 25-year-olds. I do think it's a good thing to bring up of like, what's the
Yeah.
age that we might consider for that prevention?
Since we were brainstorming, I
Yeah,
figured I'd
yeah,
say it
yeah.
before we finish.
No, I appreciate
Things
that.
that you all brainstorm might be like good information for other pillars too, as we think about treatment and recovery and harm reduction, so it's all good information.
So I am mindful of the 424, and so, and that we wanna be done by 4:30, because I know we didn't start on time, but we will end on time. So okay, so where do you go from here? I feel like people have said a lot of things, there might be more that you would wish to have shared. What I'm gonna recommend that we do is people send information that you have, that you talked about today to Melissa and I. We'll put together our initial thinking and send it back out to you all. And I think we can add to it, like and maybe we'll start by putting some things into like buckets,
Yeah.
you know,
Themes,
of ideas and themes.
Yeah.
I think so I think the next meeting, the idea was to start prioritizing some of the gaps. And then looking at some of the strategies that could impact those priorities. It's like, until we heard what comes out of this, it's hard to know what's next. So I think we might have to like do some thinking about it, looking at it. I think that still works for our next meeting, but I'm wondering if we wanna, because of the holiday, I think we said mid-January and it would be a virtual meeting, but I want us to all have enough information to be able to like do some sort of prioritizing. I'm kind of working on the fly here. Do we wanna, I think, well, we're all in the room, choosing a day and time is not a bad idea. Like literally everybody's here, which is kind of amazing.
Carrie, you can get back to us too if you're not able to look at a calendar right now. We can offer a date.
When do you think, how much time do you think we should give ourselves, you and me, to like
It's a fun group conversation.
get to the next?
I wanna keep this moving forward. I mean, I think I heard some common themes and takeaways
Yeah,
and
me
points
too.
of consideration. I think the question would be how much more information folks feel like we need to bring into it, like into the group think? Is there a lot more data collection or gathering or other people that we need to talk to? That might take a little bit more time. I think synthesizing this and offering it back to folks with some additional materials folks have shared, asking you all to review it ahead of the next meeting, I think we can do pretty quickly.
Okay, so what do we think about meeting in mid-January, the week of the 12th or the 19th?
This time.
It could be a different time.
Yeah, you can tell
too.
us this is not a good time. We just thought later in the day might be better for those of you who are in or around schools, but
Friday afternoons work, Friday mornings do not.
and
This
based
would
on the
be
availability of the space.
Virtual one, right?
Well, the
Oh, I thought it
virtual,
was
it's
only
the
for the
virtual,
next
Right, yeah, okay,
So
sorry.
And how long of a time frame? Another 2.5?
Well, I think we thought, this first one, we thought we needed more time, and I think we thought 2 hours for the next one. Does that
Does that feel
feel
right to
like
folks?
I mean, I guess I would wanna assess people's.
I think if people have time to
Not
review
available.
materials and come prepped for like, I think it's this and that, and then we can move.
How about the 23rd then?
That works.
Friday the 23rd.
Yeah.
We're talking same time.
January in the
Yeah, anytime
afternoon.
after.
Okay, great, wow.
Yeah,
This is like
that
after
works.
remarkable.
Friday afternoon is basically the only time I ever have.
Well, right, so this is working. Okay, so
2 to
let's say
4.
2 to 4
2 to
You said on the 23rd.
on the
Correct.
23rd.
I don't think I should join that day, but I mean, that doesn't mean you can't.
Do you think you couldn't join that day at all?
I have to get to Machias. I don't know how far away that is from Saco, but I think it's very far.
Well, from
that's
here, you're
possible.
3 hours, that's where I.
It's 4 hours.
Stay all the way far.
It would be 4 hours. Yeah, so you'd have to, are you traveling most of the day or do you have things in the morning?
You know, I don't know yet. It's the first week of the
Yeah.
semester.
I know, right? Okay.
But I have to present at the MEA conference on Saturday, so sometime on Friday I need to get to Machias.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I see.
Going to Machias, you've got it all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't know where that
4 hours to
is.
get
I
there.
know it's far
Yeah.
away. That's
Okay.
From Saco?
last year I had to go to Presque
Is there
Isle. I
someone
thought
else
I was
doing-
never.
Sarah,
Okay,
on
yeah.
the, is there someone else on the team, like you think might be able to like tag in for you, like Courtney?
Well, I mean, this work didn't really have anything to do with them, but.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
or I know.
Or in the car.
I mean, it's also okay if you
What
just
what
meet
about
them.
a different, what about the 16th? I do think the more we can keep the same folks in the conversation, it's gonna be easier to carry the
16th
thread.
would be fun.
16th at the same time?
That works.
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay.
That's fine.
At 2, what time?
2 to 4.
2 to 4.
Yeah, I'm in mid-coat, yep.
In your car? Okay.
I'll just, if, I might be in my car driving, that's
Okay.
fine.
That's, Melissa's the queen of
Oh my
that.
gosh, so painful. I almost said that about Machias, but you'll lose reception.
And so I was like, I don't know that I have cell service, I don't know.
Okay, so let's try for January 16th from 2 to 4.
Remember, we did a lot of infrastructure during COVID.
I wasn't here yet, I don't know. anything.
Yes,
Or
you
was
are.
outside.
Machias is my
Yes, please,
hometown,
thank
you'll
you
love
so
it.
much.
But it's a
I'm
haul.
sure it's lovely, but it's January, I don't know what the weather's gonna be like.
It's worth the drive, but it's a drive.
Take Route 1 that time of year.
Yes, exactly.
Instead of Route 9.
Don't go the fast way. Do not take the airline.
Yes,
No airline road.
yep.
As you all go away and you look at some of these materials, including MOU for Maine, take a look at the priorities that the council will have to, the items council will have to give priority to in the applications. 2 of them, I just want to highlight here, is that one of them is that the application should be for direct services to students. And there's a pretty specific prohibition on funding for research. So funding is not to be for research. The other one's priority for applications for projects that are innovative or designed to be replicated elsewhere.
I found that one interesting as we've talked a lot about the larger MOU for the MRC and evidence-based practices, so
I know.
I
don't-
circled innovation and was like, that's interesting here.
I don't know how to square that circle, and I think a couple of the ones that, the innovation grants that the national program did are described here, and at least, I think, one of the main
Yeah, I saw
recipients. So you might take a look at that for guidance.
Yeah, okay.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so we're set to meet, I'm wondering if we just wanna set the 3rd meeting, but we could also wait. I was just wondering, do we know enough to have a 3rd meeting, like how many other weeks we need in between? Or do we not really know?
I think we put a lot on our docket for the 2nd meeting, and we
Okay.
might wanna see how much we get through before we figure out a 3rd. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay.
Recognizing
Thank you all
people's
so
calendars a
much.
lot,
Yes,
yeah.
thank you
Thank
so
you,
much
everyone.
for your
Thanks,
time.
Vivian.
Thank you, Brenda, for the cookies, they're very nice of you.
Families, take a look at the